Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Community Connections Conference. We're delighted you're able to join us today. We have a great presentation for you this morning. My name is Lacey Shelby. I'm the Principal Urban Designer for the City of Minneapolis. And I've been working with a team of folks to develop this presentation for you today to give you some introduction on what the city is working on right now in big ideas in resiliency and sustainability. I've been with the city for 2 years. I was formerly with the New York City Department of Transportation, where I was the Director of Green Infrastructure. My background is in green infrastructure, climate resilient design, sustainability, and a lot of urban design and project management. One of my passions is really looking through design through the lens of sustainability and resiliency, especially as we are seeing these changes in our climate. We're seeing the changes in our demographics here in Minneapolis and trying to understand how we might better design a city. Joining me today is Kelly Mulman with the City of Minneapolis Sustainability Office. She's been with the city for almost a year now. She's working on a climate change vulnerability assessment. She also works on a lot of policy initiatives, including the Residential Energy Efficiency Policy Research, the Green Zone Initiative, and she worked on a lot of community engagement strategies around energy efficiency. Prior to working for the city of Minneapolis, she spent 4 years at the Minnesota Department of Health in the Climate and Health Program on climate change adaptation and health impact assessments. So she's bringing a lot of great background to this conversation, especially related to public health and the impacts of the climate. Adam Arvidsson is joining us from the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board. He's a landscape architect and director of strategic planning at the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board. He's also a prominent writer in the field of landscape architecture, and he is a leader among the professionals who work in environmental design and landscape architecture. He publishes widely in many different publications, and a lot of folks look to him to really guide sort of what trends and new initiatives are coming through when it comes to urban design. I'm going to just start and give you a little bit of a background on the 2040 Comprehensive Plan, as the conference is really geared towards trying to give you an introduction for what the Comprehensive Plan is. I might start first with saying I'm going to present a little bit on the Comprehensive Plan, turn it over to Kelly, turn it over to Adam, then I'll talk a little bit, and then we'll have a lot of time for sort of questions and answers. I might pose a couple questions to the audience. We have a couple microphones here at the back. Just general housekeeping, there are some restrooms just out this door and to the right. You can either turn left or turn right and you'll find them all right. If we can hold the questions until the end, unless you have a burning question, we have some flexibility in our schedule. So the Comprehensive Plan is a long-range policy guiding document that the city develops, and it's legally required. And many municipalities in the Twin Cities region are required to do this every 10 years. In the Comprehensive Plan, we're required by statute to cover specific topics, and you can see the topics lined up just here, and they're considered regionally important topics that each of the municipalities and cities should be covering in their policy guidance. If you can believe it, our actual publication date is 2018, but we start the planning process very early on because there's a lot of important questions that we need to coordinate with the community on and ask a lot of questions. So this is just a snapshot of the process where we're launching it today. We have to develop a couple key directions, is what we're calling it, that provides some themes around what policies we are looking to address as part of the larger comprehensive plan update. We go through a pretty rigorous community engagement process. We'll be actively going out into the community, hosting events, participating at festivals, and really soliciting feedback from the communities. Here is the mission statement for the Minneapolis 2040, and this was developed through a pretty rigorous process with stakeholders. And we've started to coalesce around some key values in the plan, and you can see them as little buttons on the bottom. This is a snapshot from the website that was just launched, I think, yesterday. but you can click on any of these buttons on the website. That'll zoom you into a couple of the sort of key lenses that we'll be looking through the comprehensive plan. As part of the comprehensive plan process, it's really crucial that the city isn't just saying these are the policies we need to address, but we really need to better understand from the constituents, the neighborhoods, the organizations, the residents, workers and visitors, what you'd like to see addressed as part of the policy document. So we're really being very conscious and pointed to what level of community engagement, how we're addressing it, and how we're trying to engage feedback and tracking it. Beth, who's in the back of the room just there, had just passed out an FAQ sheet that had some frequently asked questions or facts about the comprehensive plan process. There's a couple copies sitting on some tables here to give you a little bit more background on the process. We'd really like to use today's topic about big ideas and resiliency and sustainability to try and understand from you, once you've seen sort of some of the things we're working on currently, if there are other topics, if there are other ideas that you'd like to see us addressing. And this isn't the only time for you to provide feedback and input for the direction. There'll be multiple opportunities throughout the next 2.5 years to do that, but we have some dedicated note takers where we'll be taking down some big ideas and themes for what comes out of this session today. So I'll turn it over to Kelly, who will give us some introduction on the Minnesota-Minneapolis climate.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming. So as Lacey mentioned, I work in the city's sustainability office. We're really fortunate in Minneapolis to have an entire office dedicated to the topic of sustainability. We work on a lot of different things. There's Tamara Down-Schwei, who does Homegrown Minneapolis. She works on food policy and leads the food council for the city. They have a table just outside here if you have questions about that. I work mostly on energy and climate issues, as well as some broader sustainability topics. We often partner with the Public Works Department and solid waste to work on the organics collection and other things related to recycling. And we are also a key player in the Clean Energy Partnership, which is a unique nationwide partnership between the city of Minneapolis and its two utilities, Xcel and CenterPoint. CenterPoint is the main sponsor for today's event, and Xcel and others are at the solar speed dating event. I hope some of you were able to check that out today. So we are really interested in energy efficiency and renewable energy as a way to help not only our climate, but also our air quality and other benefits to our city. So I'm just going to dive in with a little bit of background on climate change and then talk about what we're doing around climate resiliency at the city. So with climate, there's a couple key trends. One of them is that we're warming. Minnesota is actually one of the fastest warming states in the nation right now. We're seeing our average temperatures increase already, not even just projected, but we've already seen some increases. There's a few underlying factors here. We might think, ooh, warmer weather in Minnesota, that sounds pretty nice. But one of the reasons that we love Minnesota is because of our natural surroundings. All the plants and animals are here because of the climate that we've had for so long, because of the ecosystems that thrive here. Adam's probably going to go into a little bit more about how some of that is changing, and the temperature increases is one key part of that. And what we're seeing, it's not just that on average our temperatures going up, but we're seeing that our overnight lows are going up. We're having more days above 90 degrees Fahrenheit. This is a projection for the state. An increase in Minneapolis of over 30 more days per summer of 90-degree plus weather. That can be uncomfortable. And we're not even talking about humidity here, which is another factor that has been increasing. And other things. So with warmer weather, we're also seeing higher temperatures in the winter. So our coldest cold days aren't as cold anymore. I think this past winter was kind of an example. We had an El Nino year, but it wasn't just El Nino. It was El Nino on steroids, basically, because of the climate effect. We're also seeing wetter weather. So this is, again, there's some average changes in precipitation, but what's really happening is we're having more large, big rain events. And that's got a few complications. One is that it can create localized flooding. We have a lot of impervious surface or pavement across the city, and our stormwater system was built back in the 1920s, most of it, for rain events that were just a few inches. Well, now we're seeing 6 inches of rain come down at any given time, and it overwhelms our system and causes flooding in our streets and our homes. And that's a big issue. We're also seeing more of our winter precipitation come as rain rather than snow. Again, we saw this a lot this winter. It had a big impact on our skiing and our sledding and our tubing. So it's not something fun for us in Minnesota. Also, when we have more of our rain coming in these heavy rain events, it also causes longer periods of dryness. So we have this intermittent major rain events and then drought. So that can be another problem. So in 2013, the cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul came together at the Science Museum to talk about climate adaptation and vulnerability. And some of the key areas of vulnerability that the city of Minneapolis identified was extreme heat, and that's related to human health impact. The map here, if you can see it, is heat-related emergency department visits across the city. And so in the downtown area, which is the darkest red, the rate was over 20 heat-related emergency room visits per 100,000, and then it goes down to the sort of light area in southwestern Minnesota of 10 per 100,000. So we're tracking this information. This data comes to the state Department of Health from hospital reports, and so this is a key indicator of are things getting worse? What do we need to pay attention to? In terms of heat, there's also concerns about the electric grid security. If we have too many people using air conditioning at one time, we could have brownouts. That's one problem. And also in Minnesota, this last point, lack of perceived threats. So we're just not used to having heat events here. So we don't think it's a big deal. We don't understand how heat can actually impact our bodies and our infrastructure. Another key area, extreme precipitation. I already mentioned this. We'll have impacts to our stormwater system and potentially property damage as a result of flooding. And then drought. Drought can have a major impact on our ecosystems, not just in Minneapolis when it comes to our dry lawns and parks and low water levels in our lakes and streams, but also broader in Minnesota. We have a huge agricultural economy here, and drought can have a major impact on that. Farmers here don't traditionally use irrigation, and that's something that they're going to have to adapt their systems to. So what are we already doing? Minneapolis is one of the only cities in the state that actually has a heat response plan. So when there is an extended heat event, the city's health department is on top of that. They are calling the hospitals and trying to figure out if they're seeing more cases of heat-related illness, and then they have actions that they can take to sort of step up response to that. We have a small green business program through our health department, which helps by giving out trees to businesses, helping them reduce their emissions, increase their energy efficiency and their insulation so that they might need less air conditioning during a heat event. We have incentives for tree planting, and as I mentioned, there's a strong connection and network coordination with our hospitals around understanding what's happening at any given time so we can be prepared to respond. What do we need to respond to climate change? Well, a lot of resources, money, to improve our stormwater system and our infrastructure. We need to work on more culturally appropriate education and outreach around new information that the community that may not have, or different ways to message it, or different languages to talk about it. So we also need to know about cooling centers, or whether people even use cooling centers. What are the best practices? How do we make sure that everyone's going to be safe in a heat event or a flood? We need backup communication systems. This could be charging stations or wireless phone providers. I was at a presentation not that long ago where our county emergency management officer was saying that he recently had a landline reinstalled in his home because during an emergency, if the cell towers go down, he would have no way of contacting anyone. It's something that I hadn't really thought about. And then we need more information in partnership with our utilities about their infrastructure vulnerabilities. More recently, actually this just ended a couple weeks ago, we had the opportunity to participate in a Resilience Dialogue pilot project that was going on at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. So it brought together a bunch of national and federal experts in energy and climate resilience, and a number of our city staff, including Lacey and myself, and others in health and emergency management. And we talked about, what does the city need to do to prepare and to become more resilient? And so some of the ideas that came out was conducting scenario planning. So how do the changes in climate sort of mesh with the changes in population? If we're having an aging population, a more diverse population, more people in the city, higher density, how does that all come together? How do we plan for that? What are the different ways, the different scenarios that could come out of that? We definitely know we need to engage all departments in this work. This isn't just something that happens in the sustainability office. We need to make sure that Public Works is engaged and they're incorporating this information into their planning, that the planning department is doing this and adding it into the comp plan, so on and so forth. And then we need to engage residents and businesses. This can't just be something that's just done by the city. It is a service that's provided. There's a lot of things that we need to do. So individual and community action, sort of leading off from that last point, what can you do about this? We've talked a lot in the past, you've probably heard in the last number of years about climate change. We need to reduce our energy use. That's a big thing for reducing the potential impact of climate change, but we're at a point now where we recognize that there's so much change that's gonna happen even if we stopped emitting greenhouse gas emissions today. So both actions are important. And actually, there's some co-benefits. So if you insulate your home and reduce the amount of energy you're using, that actually has a benefit for climate resilience too, because your home is gonna be more comfortable during a heat event. It will absorb less heat. If you plant shade trees, again, this can help absorb the carbon, but at the same time, increase the amount of shade that you have and cool the area around your home. And then create a disaster preparedness plan. And there's lots of resources on this. If you even go to the city's website, there's some key information. But having emergency contacts or buddies within your neighborhood to be in touch with, store food and water, know where the nearest shelter is and have an evacuation plan for that, and prepare for power outages. Having flashlights and batteries or battery-operated radio and things like that. But those are just some of the really basic best practices. So as Lacey mentioned, one of the things that we want to hear from you today, and hopefully this will be more work that the Sustainability Office does going forward, is what can you do? Give us ideas about things that you could do as an individual or within your community. I'm sure there's lots of really innovative things happening that we don't even know about, and we'd love to showcase them. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. As Lacey mentioned, my name is Adam Arvidsson, and I'm the Director of Strategic Planning for the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board. I'm going to apologize in advance for my voice today. I'm fighting a little bit of a cold, so if I have to take sips of water or if I get real froggy, that's why. I'm here to talk a little bit about some of the things that the Park Board is doing to think about environmental sustainability and environmental performance. The Park Board manages all of the public parks in the city of Minneapolis, as well as all the street trees. So we kind of have a direct connection to almost every resident through the tree out in front of their home, which itself provides benefits. But of course, when you go to a park, there's obviously great benefits that come from that. In Minneapolis, our entire park system constitutes about 6,400 acres, I guess just above that. Which is roughly 14% of the city, which is an extremely high percentage of the land area of a city to be in parkland and green space. So right there, we actually have an advantage because green space provides a lot of benefits in terms of cooling, in terms of stormwater management and things like that. But at the park board, we're starting to think about how can we do that a little bit more deliberately. How can we think about the parks as a way to address some of the environmental issues that are coming about? So one of the ways that we're starting to do that is through a project called the Ecological System Plan. So in partnership with the Mississippi Watershed Management Organization, last year we started a project to look at the entire park system and think about how can we improve the environmental performance of the parks, but also how can that then contribute to the environmental resiliency of the city as a whole. That project is currently kind of in a hiatus because of other workload, but we're going to start it up again here soon, and we expect to work through it this summer with community engagement and hopefully have a plan adopted later this year. One of the things that we've done here is we've tried to think about what are some different models for parks that we can explore that might give a different perspective on performance of our parks. So here's a graphic that if you look at a measure like, you know, habitat biodiversity, you could theoretically sketch a park that sort of has a maximum biodiversity. Now, this doesn't look like many of our parks, of course, if you're familiar with our parks. Few of them look like this. There are a couple that maybe do. So we also want to look at, you know, what if we were kind of in the middle ground somewhere? And then lastly, you know, here's maybe where we are today. So this is a theoretical kind of minimal biodiversity. So one of the questions that we want to ask of the community and have been asking throughout the course of the ecological system plan is, you know, what if we had this continuum? Where do we want to be landing? Because obviously any decision that we make has a potential impact on other reasons why people use the parks. So if we did our theoretical maximum, obviously there are no ball diamonds or wading pools. So we need to think about that as we go forward. So the foundation of the ecological system plan is really about asking a series of questions. First, it's really identifying these issues. You know, what are the environmental issues of our time? And I've listed a couple up here. Invasive species, climate change, water quality, flooding. Kelly mentioned flooding. If you all remember the floods from 2 springs ago and how drastic they were. I mean, we're, as a park board, still kind of reacting to that. But I think the fact was that we already have the advantage of having parkland along most of our water bodies, and there really wasn't a lot of home flooding like you hear in other communities, because the parkland was able to absorb that. I would sort of argue that it should. That's part of the purpose of that green corridor that we have along Minnehaha Creek and along our lakes, is to provide a protective barrier for those more extreme events as they come forward. And then we need to ask the question, what can parks help solve? So our framework has been that there are really kind of 2 answers to that question. All parks can help solve some of these issues. So in any park, no matter where it is, we can do some stormwater management, and we can help with that old system. We can take water out of the pipes. We can help with biodiversity enhancement in every park, no matter where it is. We can help with air quality improvement through what we plant and how we maintain that. Some parks may be better than others at solving some of those issues. Obviously, the flooding question that I just brought up, Minnehaha Creek Parkway was much better at solving that issue than, let's say, Elliott Park in downtown Minneapolis. So we do have a variety within our park system of what parks being able to solve things better than others. And when it comes to also macro stormwater management, thinking about surface water quality, habitat enhancement on the macro scale, think about the Mississippi River Flyway. Some parks are simply going to be better at that than others. So we need to start looking at our system in 2 ways. Number 1, what should we be doing in every park in order to enhance environmental performance? But number 2, should we be prioritizing certain things in certain parks in order to have better effect? So those parks that are in the Lake Hiawatha watershed, which has issues, should we be looking at what we can do in those parks in a different way than parks that might be sitting up on top of a hill? And then lastly, we have methods. So what can the park board do in order to implement some of these things and improve environmental performance? And we have several tools at our disposal. We can design parks differently. You know, we can have permeable parking lots. We can remove the storm drains from the middle of our athletic fields and instead try to direct that to the side into rain gardens, which is something we are going to do this summer at McRae Park. Park acquisition, we can actually purchase land in order to try to have an effect on the overall environmental health. This is something we are actively doing on the upper Mississippi River, where we have, over the last 3, 4, 5 years, come to own a significant proportion of the land along the upper Mississippi River, which will eventually be turned into a natural riverfront park, thereby improving the habitat quality and performance of the Mississippi River. We can manage our parks differently when it comes to how do we maintain landscapes. Are they all mown, or is there a difference within the parks of how we manage those? The tree canopy, and obviously we can collaborate with our partners. So when it comes to the comprehensive plan at the city, I'm actually involved in some of the task forces for that. So we're looking at working with our partners to do that. But another big question that we're trying to answer is, to what degree can and should parks help solve those questions? So different levels of mitigation, what are the pros and cons? Like I said at the beginning of the talk, if we sort of made our entire park system completely natural, 6,400 acres of optimal carbon sequestration, we would have no active recreational amenity, but would it make any dent whatsoever in our carbon output of the city? Possibly not. So we need to weigh what is really the benefit versus the impact on that mitigation. What is the cost of increasing environmental capacity? And at what point, because we're a public agency, at what point are we not using our money wisely? And one example of that I want to bring up is the Nokomis-Hiawatha Regional Park Master Plan. So this is in the southeastern portion of the city. It's one of our regional parks. Many people don't recognize that this is actually one large regional park and is managed as such, but it encompasses both lakes. We have an adopted master plan for this park that was recently completed. It plans everything except for the golf course itself. It was actually, the plan was being done while all this flooding was happening, so we sat in the recreation center talking about environmental sustainability, looking out the window at like pathways underwater. So it was kind of an amazing reality check. But one of the things we did here, because we were hearing a lot from the community about a desire for more environmentally sound landscapes, is we asked this question. So what kind of landscape do we want in the park? Most of our parks are what we would call a campus-style park. You have a mown plain of grass into which you may insert some natural pieces. You may have a rain garden there, you may have a pollinator-friendly habitat over there, but the underlying reality is mown grass. The other way to look at it is that the underlying reality is a natural landscape into which we deliberately put our use areas. Those use areas may be mown turf for picnicking, for sports, but it's really kind of flipping the script here. So if you think about the natural style landscape, think more about our state parks, or in our system, Worth Park, which is really a forested landscape into which we have put amenities. We put this out to the community. We had open houses, we had stakeholder meetings, we had a community advisory committee, and we asked them, which of these is appropriate for Nokomis-Hiawatha Regional Park? And overwhelmingly, the natural style was selected. So our natural resources framework for Nokomis-Hiawatha Regional Park is this. On this drawing, all of the light green is naturalized landscape that will be implemented over time. The dark green is the manicured, the managed, and the pink are the high activity areas. Right now, about 10% of the landscape in Nokomis-Hiawatha Regional Park is naturalized. This plan would increase that to 50%. And this was community supported and adopted unanimously by our board. We actually currently have money from the Lessard-Sams Outdoor Heritage Council, which is state money, to restore half the shoreline of Lake Nokomis to a natural state. And that project will be happening in the next couple of years. So a significant leap forward here. A couple other ones I want to go through really quickly. We want to build an island in the Mississippi River. Hall's Island used to be there. It used to be an important habitat stopover. It was removed. And we have a plan to actually recreate this island as a habitat venue in North Minneapolis on the upper Mississippi River. And by habitat, I mean not just the stopover birds, but all the way right onto the underwater. So we're talking about native mussel species, we're talking about turtles, and we're talking about river access for North and Northeast Minneapolis, which is really hard to come by right now. This is part of the River First vision. That was a city and park board collaboration with a lot of community engagement to think about how does the upper river become that lakeshore that does not exist in North and Northeast Minneapolis as it does in South. Halls Island has a whole lot of ecology and science behind it. We're right now in engineering to figure out how we can build that island and make sure that it stays there. And we're actually starting to collaborate with some scientists on how to ensure that the habitat that we build is appealing for mussels, birds, reptiles specifically. And then the last one I want to mention is the South Service Area Master Plan. So this is a part of town south of downtown, east of 35. We are creating master plans for every single neighborhood park in this zone. We've also been working on the downtown zone, and we will eventually work our way all the way around the entire city, essentially to create a new framework for our neighborhood parks, those small pieces of green that are so critical, and think about what they need to be for the next generation, the next 25 to 30 years. One of the things that we did during this plan is that we did a lot of community engagement. We asked a lot of questions, and we actually asked these continuum questions where we asked people to put dots along a line on where they think we should land between one extreme or the other. This goes back to my very first slide in the ecological system plan. Do we want to see that first picture that I showed you, which is completely naturalized, the optimal habitat, or do we want to see something that is purely recreational, mown turf? So we have that on either end of the scale here. I would say that our park system right now is at about 90% to the right. Not a lot of natural. So where the community put their dots are significantly clustered toward the center and then leaning toward the natural on the left. Now, if we were to convert 50% of our park system to naturalized landscape, I'm not sure people would overall like the impact of that. However, to me, this demonstrates a significant desire to move to that natural side of the equation. And the big reason that I'm hearing this is not, yes, there is the environmental, altruistic, pollinators are good, habitat is good, environment is good kind of thing. But more and more I hear from people that this is a recreational necessity for them. So we have started to merge the idea of sort of environmental altruism with the personal need and desire of wanting to do bird watching, nature photography, and when I walk on a trail in my park, I want to walk through a naturalized landscape rather than through mown turf. That was the underpinning behind the Nokomis-Hiawatha plan, and I think we're seeing it expressed here too. And I can assure you it's something that we're hearing in the community regularly, and it's something that we will continue to work on. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Lacey Shelby.
Thanks, Adam. I'm thinking as I'm hearing the presenters share that maybe I'd like you to be thinking about one thing in particular. What environmental conditions influence your daily life? As we're hearing some of these strategies, we're looking really big picture, and I'm sitting there thinking, well, what does that mean to me? Well, one thing for sure, I'm a real sweaty person, and I know that in the summer, if it's a little bit hotter than like 80 degrees, I have to change my shirt like twice a day. So small changes like that will influence your life in years to come, where you think that might not be a big deal. What also you might not think is a big deal is that, well, your family may like to ski. Well, how many days this year did you ski? And maybe if that reduces, then you might be spending more money to fly to Denver to ski with your family. So think about what some of these changes, what some of these strategies will influence your daily life, and especially when it comes to design. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about design and my office in the planning department. Gosh, I'm afraid I have to stand behind this podium. I think I prefer to like work the room. So I work in what we call the public realm. So if you think about a street, think about the building face to the building face in a downtown environment, so the sidewalk and the roadway. In your residential environment, think about the edge of the sidewalk as it hits your property through the tree boulevard to the curb, through the roadway to the other side of the street. These divisions kind of happen because the park board operates on the park board owned properties, the city operates on city owned properties. What makes up that public realm, besides the roadways, sidewalks, tree boulevard, is also the people. It's also sort of what influences you as a pedestrian or cyclist or motor vehicle operator in the street as you experience a street. What makes up our public realm are all of these features, and this is just looking at a specific urban context, but if you take it away, you can imagine your residential one-story homes or apartment buildings, but generally we're looking at many of these features. And as each of you live in your neighborhoods or go to work every day, you probably don't ask yourself this question, but you know inherently as you experience place what makes it a place. So you'll decide to walk down one side of the street as opposed to another, based on things that you might be in the back of your mind but might not be sort of in the forefront of your mind. That could be the other side of the street could be have more trees on it. It could be quieter. Maybe there's a barking dog on one side of the street that you don't like getting close to. Maybe you like walking past an art gallery window and peeking in, or you like people watching on one side versus the other. All of those things start to create place, and those features in place can be food truck, bike rack, planting, street tree, active ground floor use. What helps us define and develop these places has to do a lot with policy and ordinance and regulations. And those are the things that we're going to be addressing as part of the Comprehensive Plan 2040. So every time a development project comes to the city of Minneapolis and says, I want to put in a 10-story building here, I want to put a Trader Joe's on the bottom floor or something like that, we look through our city policies, we look at our comprehensive plan document, and really look and comb through to see if that development is adhering to what the city has put forth in our goals. So that's why we're inviting today a little bit of conversation around that. So what has been working for you when you think about the design of space and your experience as a person and a neighbor, resident, worker in your neighborhoods? What do we need to add or change to make it feel more like your city, to make it feel more like the city you want to live, grow old in, raise your families in, and continue to work in? The way we do that is through policy, regulation, and ordinance. One thing that I'm working on right now is what's called the Public Realm Guidelines. And we have so many city programs that support planting of trees, putting in bike racks, activating streets, but not a lot of people understand sort of the mechanism for which that gets done. So what we're working collaboratively with the Minneapolis Park Board, with the Public Works Department, and several other departments is developing and clarifying what those strategies are and what those typologies are for creating a public realm. So this is still being developed, but we've developed conditions where we might say a preferred condition for putting in a rain garden or a bioswale, developing a stormwater plant or a stormwater bump out. When we think about the environmental conditions and what we need to think about for the future, where Adam was talking about a more naturalized landscape in some conditions, and Kelly is talking about the public health impacts, we need to understand the public infrastructure impacts. So as we all know, infrastructure funding for our roads and bridges is not as hefty as we'd like. Currently most of our streets were built about 60 years ago, so a lot of those streets need to come up for reconstruction. So how might we reconstruct a street for a 21st century street? We're seeing many more bike users, people who are moving into areas where they can grocery shop, go to coffee shops, take their kids to daycare. So these more compact, denser communities, what conditions do we need to support to build that 21st century street? We have a lot of great pilot projects that have already been executed by the Public Works Department and the Park Board. Here are a couple examples where we've incorporated stormwater management features into the roadway infrastructure to support some of these changing environmental conditions. So a lot of our streetscapes, and this is just looking at one sort of area of downtown Minneapolis, there's a broad range of conditions. So you have a very dense environment outside the target center where you need to design a street that can support massive flows of pedestrian traffic during compressed amounts of time. So you may not be able to add so many features which would prevent the safe movement of pedestrians, create some security challenges, so you have to find a balance. Whereas, say on Nicollet Mall, we're going through a big reconstruction process there where we're going to be adding a lot more green, a lot more public realm into that space to create moments for cafe seating. And then you'll have these lower density streets which have residential structures where we would have maybe 5 to 8 foot sidewalks where you can compress and reduce the amount of pervious pavement to allow for a little bit more planting. This is sort of my little checklist. This is what I personally use as the urban designer in the city when I think about streets and developing them around this concept of ecosystems or delivering sort of environmental services through street design. And this is the way I try and sell it to my partners in the Public Works Department, because we're thinking about the operational and functional effectiveness of the street, and safety is the number one sort of design factor in most of the strategies that we deploy. So when you think about that, you really don't want to have a lot of standing water on your roadways. You really want to reduce the speed of the vehicles where there's a lot of pedestrian movement, and you can do that by adding in certain types of enhancements. Investing in the beauty of a street, adding sort of interest along those corridors, scaling features so you feel part of the street itself. And then thirdly, imagining a capital life without you. So like I said, most of our streets were reconstructed 60 years ago. It's amazing. A lot of them are still holding together. But a lot of times our infrastructure is as old as 100 or 125 years old. So we're long gone by the time the next investment will occur. So instead of designing street infrastructure for 25 and 35-year capital life, which is a lot of the federal funding dollars sort of support, we need to think on a much longer term scale. And so that's really thinking about what is Minneapolis going to be like in 2040. I mean, that blows my mind because I'm going to be much older, and who knows what's going to be happening. We may have, like, I don't know, I often think about the Back to the Future movie about the dude on the skateboard that was like a hovercraft thing. I don't think we're too far from that, actually. So how would you design a city around that? And then fourth and finally is the unlocking new funding sources. So I mentioned that we're really challenged and we have a lot of constraints around funding our transportation enhancements and park enhancements, where we're really reaching out and we're looking through new funding partnerships and arrangements, and we're trying to create better mechanisms or widgets to allow those partnerships to happen. And one example is the Commons, which is the new park that's going in front of the Vikings Stadium, where we're working with Green Minneapolis, which is through the Minneapolis Downtown Council and Downtown Improvement District, to partner and to develop maybe a concession agreement to find a partner that's not a city to help support the development, management, and operation of the parks. So another way we can think about that is one simple thing people can do just as a property owner is pull an encroachment permit if you want to put something out into the public realm. So a lot of people do that for installing planters or, I don't know, a street bench. So you pull that permit, you make the investment, and you put it out in the public realm, and you take care and manage it. And that's an encroachment permit that anybody can pull who's the property owner. So we're trying to create places where you can relax and linger and enjoy space. We have a program that we launched in 2014 called the Parklet program. And these are structures that are in the roadway where they're public spaces that allows a little bit more widening of the sidewalk for people to enjoy and spectate. Spaces for leisure. This is one of my favorite sort of pop-up projects called Little Box Sauna, and you can Google that. And this has been popping up in different areas around the Twin Cities where this is actually a sauna, and people can go in and sauna and then enjoy the air outside. It was on Nicollet Mall, and also, Peter, was it on 38th and Nicollet most recently? So these mobile and sort of temporary projects really help enhance our public realm. And also, as Adam was addressing, a habitat. So this can be created not just on park board property, so not just in park spaces, but it can happen also on our streets. And play. So a lot of kids are really screen dependent these days, and they like, I've just been experiencing this with my niece. She likes watching videos of other kids playing instead of her playing. So it's really weird for me to sort of understand that. So, if we need to really enhance and sort of elevate sort of the experience kids have in environments that gives them a more natural sort of exploratory opportunity. Let's create those moments for that to happen. Social engagement, it's key. A lot of us, again, going back to sort of more of our digital lives, so many of us are looking down on our phones. So how can we create an atmosphere that allows us to interact and engage with the public? And of course, exposure to all the elements and what can we better do to enhance that experience. So, whether it's creating opportunities along the Mississippi River where you can go down to the riverfront and access the river, or going into Theaterworth Park, or walking down Nicollet Mall. And then, of course, this spectate. We all love to people watch. That's my mom's favorite pastime. And this can happen in all sorts of environments. And again, it's about this social engagement. So getting back to what Kelly was talking about, and creating those social networks, it may not seem like a big deal to put together a disaster preparedness kit or something along those lines, but when I was in New York City, I was there for Hurricane Sandy, and I worked at a shelter for 7 days, and I thought, who would have ever imagined this to happen? Like, I didn't have anything together. There were families coming into the shelter with kids with garbage bags on who had to walk from the Rockaways into Brooklyn to where my shelter was. And I thought, nobody was prepared for this. Same with 9/11. There are all sorts of threats that the Office of Emergency Management are considering, but we're not necessarily prepared for because we don't think that could happen here. But we're seeing increases in extreme weather events that we need to really start to think about as we, whether it's doing yard maintenance around our house, whether it's thinking about how our boulevard can improve and enhance and reduce the amount of flooding that might happen in our basement. What can we do there? And then, of course, these opportunities to just sit and enjoy nature, peace. Public art is always a great way. The Bunny is over near Minnehaha, and this is such a great opportunity for youth and kids to climb on this feature. It's one of the most famous and beloved public art structure in the Twin Cities collection. And then wayfinding. A lot of people just don't know how to get there. So how can the city better enhance those wayfinding devices and serving? And this is actually a park board wayfinding strategy because we don't have a lot of great ones. Thank you very much. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your Saturday to join us today.